something was missing.
Could one small shift in your habits change everything?
I was reading, I was meditating, I was journaling, I was going to retreats, I was doing the yoga, doing the breath work. And I was like, I feel it, but I don't feel it.
Amanda Kuda, coach for the sober curious and author of Unbottled Potential, is on Intentional Living with Courtney Meyers.
I kept receiving this notion, this message inside that said, you have to get alcohol out of the picture.
Talking the taboo topic of getting sober.
You do not have to have a problem with alcohol for alcohol to be holding you back in your life.
Finding your true spiritual essence.
I needed to be a clear vessel.
And stumbling upon your most miraculous life ever.
When I stopped drinking and I really stayed focused on those spiritual practices, miracles started to happen. It's like all I had to do was get out of my own way.
On an all-new Intentional Living with Courtney Meyers. Welcome to Intentional Living with Courtney Meyers, a podcast dedicated to those seeking a more fulfilled and purposeful life through thought-provoking conversation, spiritual exploration, and authentic connections. The intentional movement has begun, and if you found yourself here, you are a part of it. Intentional Living with Courtney Meyers starts now. Hi, Amanda. Welcome to Intentional Living with Courtney Meyers. I'm so excited to talk to you today and really dive into a concept that has been fascinating to me in the spiritual and wellness community. And I know what is very near and dear to your heart, being sober, electively sober. And I think it's a really fascinating topic. It's like a taboo topic. A lot of times people get really weird about this. So I'm really excited that we get to have an open conversation all around spirituality, alcohol, all the good stuff, and how it all works together.
Oh, I'm super excited to talk as well because it is still taboo, but it's becoming a little more mainstream. And so it's really something that I know that your listeners are probably catching wind of or maybe really interested in. And I'm excited to debunk any myths or offer any guidance that I can today.
Well, why do you think it is becoming more mainstream? I mean, people are more openly talking about sobriety and now, but it's still like we were talking just before we jumped on, sometimes you still have to search for that information because there's a lot of people in the spiritual and wellness community who are sober, but it's not always just stated up front.
Oh, totally. When I started becoming sober curious is the term, 8 or 9 years ago, I was in the middle of my spiritual development path and I was following, Gabby Bernstein, Wayne Dyer, Marianne Williamson, some of the new age spirituality people that have guided a lot of this movement, Brene Brown even, and the personal development space. And I began to, as I was digging into their work, they all kind of lightly mentioned that they didn't drink or that they were sober. And so I would pick up these little nuggets of wisdom and I would kind of just put them in a little safe place to remind me. But even at that point, 7 to 10 years ago, being sober was something that was associated directly with 12 steps in recovery, alcoholism and addiction, which are very important, valid paths. And I'm on a mission to teach people that you do not have to have a problem with alcohol for alcohol to be holding you back in your life. And I sensed 7 or 8 years ago that alcohol was indeed holding me back. But because I couldn't find anyone to be like, hey, yeah, Amanda, by the way, you could just quit drinking. You don't have to call yourself an alcoholic or go to AA. I kind of edged away from it because I thought, oh, well, that seems scary. No one's doing that. Therefore, it must be impossible, or I would be a social outcast. And I think that the perfect storm has happened in the past 5 or so years that it started to become a conversation that people are comfortable with. The first thing is that a lot of people just started talking about it more and more. And, myself and some of my peers, mostly women, were really on the forefront of that, wanting to make sobriety more accessible and make it an open conversation. And I think that's so amazing that women have been these crusaders and that social media has given us this platform to share a message. And then some other really unique things happened that, we had the pandemic. So we were all beholden to our phones as ways to connect and receive information. And with the uprising of TikTok and, people just being on Instagram, it created a platform for people to share their stories and share their experience and connect with other like-minded people that you may have never come across. And so now you're getting even more information about people who are doing this thing, deciding to be alcohol free, that you didn't have to dig for the information. It's almost been given to you on a platter. So it's becoming more accessible. I think that Gen Z, is also doing some great work because they are making the conversation around therapy and self-help and personal development so much more accessible. And so there's just all of these things coming into the mix that's making it a perfect time to choose a personal and spiritual development path that maybe it didn't seem cool or possible or something relevant to you before.
Well, why do you think it is so tied, going alcohol free to your spiritual development? Because if you really look at, like those names of the people, the Wayne Dyers, the Gabby Bernsteins, there's a lot of them. I've talked to a lot of people on this show about it, who, when you go down that path and you open yourself up and you have this awakening, alcohol, it's almost like it becomes less important, or you might have had an addiction problem and you got sober and then you awakened. Like there seems to be a tie-in with spirituality and going alcohol free. I know I still have my occasional glass of wine, but people that used to know me or knew me before I really stepped into the space openly, because, I was kind of like closeted, not talking about this for a while.
We all have that time.
But, when I openly stepped into my spiritual space, it's like people don't understand that side of me. Like, but you love your wine. You belong to all the wine clubs. Like, it was like this thing. And I went out and I partied hard, like in my 20s and 30s, like borderline. I probably had a problem. But then all of a sudden one day I just kind of woke up and was like, I don't really crave it or want it anymore. And I'm so much more in my spiritual power. And I wonder if there's a connection. Now, like I had told you before, my husband did the Challenge 75 hard. And that part of that is 75 days without alcohol. It's a whole challenge and it's really hard. And he did it about 2.5 years ago. And he loved the effects of going alcohol free so much that he just never went back. And so it has made it easier in my home. I don't have that partner. For a while, I still was taking on, that bottle of wine by myself. But then it just became like, why am I doing this? I don't like it. And since I've really stopped, it's not that I don't ever have that glass of wine, but it's so rare at this point that it's like I've stopped. But I'm seeing that connection.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I'm glad that you are noticing that in your life. And thank you for bringing it up, because there's some subtleties there that I tend to see some trends in the women who I work with, because I typically work with super ambitious women who are on the cusp of a spiritual awakening. And so, in the recovery community, part of that path is really spirituality focused. So, you have someone like a Gabby Bernstein, who she was on a spiritual path. She quit drinking and she stepped even further into it. And that's a really big component of the program and of the 12 steps. And I think that sometimes people find spirit through being sober, and sometimes people are called to spirit and they realize that they cannot connect if they are consistently drinking and partying. And so that was my path. I would equate it to, you are always connected to spirit, universe, intuition even. You always are connected to that power, and you always have the ability to tap into it. And yet it is as if you are trying to connect to it in a tunnel on a flip phone. And the reception is not going to be good. If someone's young and they're like, what the hell is a flip phone? It's the phone we used to have before we had an iPhone. Okay. So it's an old school cell phone. And that, what that's like to be like, I know I can get a signal, but it's kind of crackly and I can hear every other word, versus being out in the open with a state-of-the-art iPhone right near to a cell phone tower. The reception is going to be so much stronger. So drinking is like the flip phone in a tunnel, and being sober is like state-of-the-art phone out next to the tower on Wi-Fi. And that is what I started to feel. I really wanted to connect to that spiritual power of my own understanding. And I was doing all the things, Courtney. I was reading, I was meditating, I was journaling, I was going to retreats, I was doing the yoga, doing the breath work. And I was like, I feel it, but I don't feel it. And I kept receiving this notion, this message inside that said, you have to get alcohol out of the picture. And I was like, oh no, I don't want to do that. That seems boring. Because as you said, it was such a big part of my identity. I was this Carrie Bradshaw type who, at the end of the week, I went out and had a margarita, or I went out and had a drink or two. And I think that it's so normalized that I was terrified to give it up, because I thought it said something about me. I was worried, one, people might think that I was an alcoholic, or two, that people wouldn't want to be my friend. And I prioritized those fears so much that I didn't listen to this other part of me for so long that really just wanted to step onto this spiritual path and knew that if I wanted to have the full spiritual experience, I needed to be a clear vessel. And so I think that many people right now are waking up to this spiritual connection and they're being called to being alcohol free. And then there's this one other piece of it that I wonder if you've experienced too, Courtney, that is as you step into that spiritual space, you start to become more energetically sensitive. And how that looks like for me and many people is even when I tried to drink, it was, and this could be age too, but I'm going to equate it to the spiritual journey because I noticed that I could not drink anything and I would just feel just obliterated. I would feel so upset. I would feel really depressed. I would feel really anxious. I would feel like something was missing. I just had this sense that something was missing the next day. And I felt lonely. It really just turned up the dial on my existential dread. And I wonder if you have experienced that too, that it just seems like as you step more into your spiritual path, the less and less aligned it feels to drink alcohol.
It definitely feels less aligned. Like I'm not called to it like I once was. What I do find is I actually think I masked my connection because it was so strong with alcohol.
Yeah.
Like I didn't know that all these emotions and feelings I was taking on weren't mine. So it's kind of like that empath overload, which I think, and I felt so uncomfortable in who I was so much that I reverted to, alcohol to make me uncomfortable to the point where like the majority of the time I was drinking, especially in my 20s, it was like blackout stage to the point. And people would say they would look at me and be like, we didn't even know you were blacked out. How do you not remember that? Because I was so high functioning in that state that it wouldn't even be, people wouldn't be aware of it. And that was actually one of my questions for you is like, as if you're so spiritually connected, and I know everyone is connected, but some of us are just tuned in automatically a little bit higher on a different level from the get-go. I'm wondering if you are more tuned in and you don't know that you are, is that when you're reaching for things to mask it because you don't know what these emotions and feelings are, And that's another thing I think, because I'm still on anti-anxiety medicine that I would love to be off of. And I wonder if that's like the same thing. Is that masking some of that connectedness? Am I not as clear of a channel because I'm putting an outside substance chemical, I'm altering my system. And that's all I feel like comes together. And I hate that.
Yeah. Yes, that is. Let me explain how this works. So, and just so you know, FYI, for anyone listening, I'm not a doctor or a scientist, but I can really break it down into layman's terms. So here's how it happens. So I also am very empathic. I was a witchy little kid. I remember watching the movie Matilda and thinking, oh, she's like me. That's like me. And I don't have telekinesis. Like I can't move things with my mind like Matilda can. But I remember seeing this girl who was so different from her peers, so different from her family that she just had something magical about her. And I remember thinking, that's me. And so I've always really been very empathic, very in tune with nature, with a spiritual connection that I, kind of just intuited was there and have just always had something really interesting happening in my mind. I know that I saw and perceived the world in a different way than my peers. Does that kind of sound like you as a kid a little bit?
Totally. 1,000%. Yes.
Absolutely. And while my parents didn't do anything, thank goodness they weren't Matilda's parents who were just like terrible, treacherous people, but most people don't know how to cultivate that sense of intuition, that sense of spiritual curiosity and connection within a child. Society certainly doesn't teach us that is right, normal, or popular. And so I always felt really different. And being intuitive and empathic, I was so smart that I knew how to dial it down. So I knew which parts of my personality were not socially acceptable, so we could dial those down and dial everything up. And then what happens when we get to adolescence is that we're given a tool that helps us do that without us having to manage it so much. And so, for a lot of people who are very intuitive, maybe they have some clairvoyant, claircognizant, clairsentient type capabilities. Maybe they're just super empathic and they just feel on a very deep level. They're highly sensitive individuals. Using alcohol becomes a tool to turn down the volume on those sensitivities. And if you've never been taught to manage them, of course, that feels good. But here's the catch to that is that when you when you dull down something that is uniquely you, something that is put in the very being of your makeup, at some point you start to feel out of authentic alignment, and that doesn't feel good.
Yes.
And that, sometimes can cause us to drink a little bit more, kind of like you were talking about, like to blackout state, because we don't know what to do. No one told us. No one tells us this. And so we drink because we feel uncomfortable. Then we don't have the wherewithal to figure out how to get comfortable. So we just drink again and we put ourselves in this cycle. And what we really need to do is stop and say, wait a second. What if there's some intelligence within my body that I haven't tapped into that I could totally learn how to manage, but I just never quite have? What if I could learn a new skill and then I could be this authentically embodied being who has kind of a superpower that I've untapped for all these years? And that's what I found is so powerful with individuals who are very spiritually attuned, who quit drinking, is they're able to tap into their authentic code at a different level. And whether that means for you intuition, empathy, some sort of maybe mystical, magical side of you, it's really powerful to be sitting in your authentic truth. And is it easy? No, because a lot of times that does come with anxiety or some other things we need to learn to manage that we've told are not okay or that are impermissible. And I truly believe that we have the capability to do that. So yeah, I hope that kind of gives you some insight or answers your questions.
Totally. And I think what you're saying is also we have to have the courage to stand out and be different and be our authentic self in that, because, it is so easy. Alcohol is such a tool for fitting in. And we use it for that, to mask whatever side of us that we don't feel is accepted. But what I've even found with stepping away from it and not drinking as much, like I still don't feel accepted. Like there's issues, where people like don't want to respect that, or they think it's weird that you're not drinking so much. And so there is a courage, and there's like this, you have to own yourself a little bit and stepping. So there's like a lot, I think, that goes into that decision, but to be like, this isn't for me.
Yeah, you have to be curious and you have to be courageous in order to claim that maybe the path that you've chosen isn't the path that you want to be invested in anymore. And, especially with someone like you, Courtney, who has a background in media and television, like you're always surrounded by things that are very mainstream, and you're surrounded by a lot of social networks that really revolve around drinking and partying and cocktail hours and rubbing elbows. And so many people who are listening, I'm sure, can relate on whatever different plane.
Yeah.
And the thing with that is because we've immersed ourselves in cultures and groups with other people who are like us, be it from work or for play and pleasure, is that we start to get tunnel vision and we start to assume everyone is like this. There's no one who's not. Therefore, if I step outside of this social construct, I will be rejected. I'll have no one. I'll be a social outcast. I won't have any friends. And we start to really lay it on ourselves. We start to fall into this fear spiral. And the reality is that no, we've just been operating with tunnel vision. And so we've been optimizing for finding people who look, seem, and act like us. And we've been seeing more of that. The reality is in your peripheral vision, there's all different types of people and a lot of people who will celebrate you and find you being in your authentic power and you being alcohol free or whatever that looks like for you so lovable and amazing. But because you are currently in tunnel vision, it doesn't seem like they exist. And if you could just be brave enough to open up your field of vision and try it out, I think that you'll find that those people will appear out of nowhere. I mean, you do have to leave your house. There's a catch there. I mean, they'll be on social media too. They will be on social media, but you also should leave your house and you're going to start to see people who think and act like you. But right now you're just so stuck in the kind of status quo that you're not able to see that. And I promise you they're out there and they will celebrate you for being your truest self.
Well, isn't that so true? When you open yourself up, when you create that vacuum and you step into your alignment in general, that's when you're going to attract what's for you into your life, the people, the opportunities, all of that, which it sounds like that happened for you, even going down your spiritual path. Like you're like, this is kind of working, but not totally. Like there has to be more. It's like that was the missing piece for you to really open up to what your true purpose was and your true passion was.
Yeah. I mean, truly, I did I would say like the spiritual buffet for a couple of years. And I was reading, if they were on Oprah's Super Soul Sunday. I was reading their work, watching their YouTube videos, doing the practices. I really thought that I was doing the work. But for every mindful practice that I implemented, I was kind of canceling it out with this mindless habit of drinking. So it was like during the week, I'm like Kundalini yoga, journaling, whatever, doing all the things. And then on the weekend, it was like I was doing this one thing that was seemingly harmless, but it canceled it out. And wouldn't you know, Courtney, that when I stopped drinking and I really stayed focused on those spiritual practices, miracles started to happen. I can't tell you how many things that I had been wanting for or really working for a long time just suddenly like clicked into place. And it wasn't like I didn't work hard for them, but the work felt aligned and it felt easeful, if not easy. And from that point in time, I've become what one of my girlfriends has told me multiple times recently, Amanda, you're the only person who I know who's truly happy. Like you are happy. And I can tell that when I'm around you. And that feels so good to receive that because just what an honor to be that in someone else's life and to have that reflected. And on like just a bigger level, like I have my dream job. I work for myself. Not everyone wants to quit the corporate world, but I definitely wanted to. And that was scary. I manifested a top book agent, a book deal with a top publisher. And so many amazing things have just come into my life that I wanted for years. And it's like all I had to do was get out of my own way and make one simple decision. And everything else from there started to be kind of easy.
Well, I think you said something really key when you were explaining that, the mindlessness. Like, I think we go about our day, whether it's drinking, eating, watching TV, scrolling our phone, like there's so much mindlessness that we incorporate in our life that it doesn't matter what we're doing. We're not actually living in alignment with all these different practices that we're trying to bring in. We almost have to remove that mindless aspect of self, which are usually the most addicting parts of us.
Oh, totally. I mean, let me tell you what, once alcohol was out of the way, then of course I still have my phone. I still have all these other little habits, but it made it so much easier for me to check in because alcohol was not only sucking me of time. I was at the end where I was kind of getting sober curious. I was investing a lot of time trying to figure out when could I drink. Not like when could I, when would I drink, when would I abstain, what techniques would I employ so that I didn't overdrink. And then if I did overdrink, which was more often than not, what would I do to like pull myself out of the like self, hatred that I was in or the self disappointment. And it was just like, wow, even those four things were taking up a lot of hours in my week, not to mention the kind of fog that was, clouding me during my hangovers. And I didn't realize until I was completely alcohol free for umpteen days, we're talking probably well over 30, that I wasn't just, my drinking was probably Friday night from 5 p.m., Saturday, Sunday, half of the day, whatever. And I thought, by the end of Monday, I'm good. No, I was that like foggy feeling, if I'm being realistic, was lasting until like Thursday. So I had a good day on Thursday. I had a good-ish day on Friday, then I would start the cycle over again. And that's not the way we deserve to live life. Like I just was not operating at full capacity. But because I was so successful, I didn't know it until I felt what it was like to operate at full capacity. And that took me taking a pretty decent break from alcohol. And then it felt really powerful and that felt really good.
When that fog is removed, it is like the best feeling. I remember the very first time I drank, probably about 2 summers ago. Like I had gone like 6 months without drinking or something, or like a decent amount of time, like 4 months. I have 2 young kids. My husband's not drinking. Like we weren't doing it. It wasn't like by design. It just kind of happened. And then we had like a social outing. We had some friends over to watch football and I, not thinking, had some wine and it was during the day. So I had some wine during the day and then they left when the games were over and it was like 9 o'clock at night. And I was just kind of like, I remember that moment. I looked at my husband and was like, why did I do that? Like, I don't want to do this
Mm-hmm.
anymore. And then there was like this fog. You felt that fog and that haze, and it just felt
Mm-hmm.
so much better. And that clarity that comes with it. So like, I really actually, it's funny that you say that you would like manage the times that you would drink. Now I manage the time, when you would get to drink. Now I manage the times and like, okay, am I willing to go into that fog space because I want to have that glass of wine with this dinner? Because now, when you don't drink often, a lot less, a lot
Yes.
less will put you into that fog than it once did. But it's really remarkable when you can notice that shift. And that I think is a huge turning point for anyone that is going into this or is curious about being sober.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It's being able to notice the difference, but until you've given yourself some space, like if you wouldn't have taken that 6 months, then that one glass of wine, if it would only have been 2 weeks or so, that one glass of wine, it would have been like, oh, this is familiar to me.
Yeah.
But once feeling good starts to feel familiar, then any little thing that takes you off of that good feeling is like, ugh, no, I'm going to pass.
Exactly. Like we want to feel good. And I've actually even read recently the stat that like the majority of car accidents happen on Monday morning. And it's not like the Sunday scaries or the Monday issue, like whatever they say about Mondays, like the Monday blues, because of like people are so devastated about having to go to, I'm sure people don't want to go to work or things like that.
Totally.
But it's because of the way we act from like Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. We're getting out of our routines. We're not being mindful. We're letting any of our healthy practices go. We're staying up later. We're drinking. We're overeating, all this stuff. And that fog carries through. And that's why the majority of car accidents and things like that happen on Monday mornings during commutes.
Oh, so interesting. Yeah, we abandon ourselves a little bit. And we tell ourselves this story that we deserve it or we need it.
Yes.
And whether that's just like eating like crap or whatever it is that you might do to like self-soothe and abandon on the weekend, I think the bigger problem is that, and also to wrap back around to the empath piece, is that we are incredibly powerful and capable human beings that are always looking for shortcuts and that also haven't been given the tools that we need to fully manage our stress, deal with our emotions. And guess what? We are living in freaking high stress environment. So I get it. There's a lot going on. You're always being inundated with news and messages. And yet, if you're always taking the quick fix way out, whether that is, emotional eating or drinking or scrolling, you're never teaching yourself how to actually manage insurmountable emotions or even really happy emotions that might feel kind of dangerous and edgy to you because maybe you've always been taught that the other shoe is going to drop. If we never get into our full capacity to manage that, which is one of the things I'm really passionate about working with my students about, then we're just doing ourselves a disservice. We're always going to be stuck in this rut where we're trying to check out as quickly as possible, to numb out as quickly as possible because we don't know how to get there on our own. And of course, Courtney, from, your spiritual practices that there are ways to do it, but they do take a little effort and they're not quite as quick as alcohol, but they are more effective because it actually works. It's not cheating.
So do you think things like alcohol or any sort of thing that we're searching for to like regulate ourselves, do you think that is actually causing more dysregulation in our body and our systems?
Oh, absolutely. Because it is cheating. Like alcohol, and as someone who works through anxiety, alcohol doesn't curb your anxiety. It dips it for a little bit, but then it goes right back up.
It goes way worse
the next
afterwards.
day.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And if alcohol were actually helping you, all of a sudden you just would cease to be anxious. You just would know how to do it and you don't. So it's like, it's this thing though, because we don't want to see that piece of it because it's like such a goodie for us that it's absolutely dysregulating us more. In fact, there's, if you haven't listened yet, there's a really great podcast on Andrew Huberman's show called, let's call it the Andrew Huberman podcast, but his episode on the mental and physical effects of alcohol, what alcohol does to your body and brain, that is just really fascinating because unlike me, Andrew Huberman is a scientist and he reviewed tons of scientific articles to break down what alcohol does to you. And it fundamentally changes the chemistry of your brain and it makes you less capable of dealing with adversity of any kind. And so whether that is mental or physical stress, whether that is someone saying a snide comment or whatever, it just shuts down the capacity of your brain to cope. And so if we do that frequently enough, your brain is just going to be like, oh, I don't know how to do that, or that's scary, or that's hard. And you're going to try and bypass that emotion. And the brilliant thing is that your brain is able to relearn, so you can retrain your brain to do things you've never known how to do before, the things that you've cheated your way through, but you have to be willing to show up and practice. It's like a muscle that is atrophied because it's been sedentary for too long. Now you have to flex it. Now you have to do the workout and get that muscle back up to strength, but you can do it because your body and your brain are so intelligent.
Yeah, I have a friend that says, she teaches meditation and things. And it's kind of like people come to her after meditating for 30 days going, I don't feel anything. Like it's not having an effect. She's like, come back to me in 6 years. Come back to me in 10 years. Some of these practices, take time to really show their effects.
Totally.
It's not going to be overnight. And we live in a society that is so overnight, but then we also live in a society that pushes. I mean, what do they say? Like alcohol is the most accepted drug that we push on people. I mean, look at just being like, I'm a mom of young kids. It's like, okay, kids go to bed, time to get your glass of wine. There's like this mommy wine culture that's talked about, which is super dangerous. It's just creating this like this thing that it's okay just to drown yourself. And because being a mom is hard. Young kids are hard. And I get that. You want that release, but we need to also find different ways. We need to reteach our brain different ways of how to cope with the stress of that, because all it is teaching either dysregulating us, and we're showing our kids what dysregulation looks like. And then you feel like crap to deal with them even the next day.
Yeah, loosens your patience. Like, I mean, moms are the real MVP. Like, let's be clear here. There is no question about it. And I also don't want to glamorize that because it is difficult. It's hard to manage yourself and another 1+ human beings. And if you are not exemplifying for your kids what it looks like to have healthy management of stress, anxiety, sadness, grief, overwhelm, let alone to be happy, excited, joyful on your own, how are they ever supposed to learn? They're modeling from you, and they are much more astute than you think that they are. So you are doing yourself and other people in your life a disservice by using this quote unquote tool to drown your sorrows and elevate your happiness. And it has become such a cure-all, which I think is another really dangerous thing. I think it's, I want to say Sade Simone said something to the effect of, when you get into a place where you're using the same thing to elevate your happiness as you're using to cure your sadness, you've made something godlike, and that is dangerous. That is dangerous territory. And I'm like, yeah, that is dangerous. But what have we done with alcohol? We are using it as a cure-all across the board to elevate happy emotions and drown sad ones. And it's time that we take a look and realize that we are capable of feeling those emotions and we're worthy of it. And I wanted to say this earlier when I forget exactly what you had asked about our resilience. And the really messed up thing that happens subconsciously when we use alcohol, especially either for happy or sad emotions. When we use it for happy emotions, what alcohol does is it stops everything. It stops all your circuits from working at full capacity. So if you drink it when you're happy, it's stopping your happiness right there. It's like putting a cap on it. And if you drink it when you are feeling sad, it's like pickling your sadness. It's keeping your sadness from being fully felt. And so what you do when you cap your happiness or you pickle your sadness is you say, 1, you're not worthy of feeling any better than this. You're not worthy of true happiness. Or 2, you're not capable of feeling this difficult emotion. You're not good enough. You don't have what it takes. And those aren't very nice messages. Would you ever say that to your kid? Like, those are terribly destructive messages. And yet we say it to ourselves all the time, unwittingly, when we choose to drink. And that's not the message I would want anyone to send to themselves. And it's so subtle that we wouldn't even recognize it. And yet I've rarely found occasions where that's not somehow true.
Well, that's interesting that you say that, because we do use alcohol on both ends of the spectrum. You had a hard day. Oh, you deserve a glass of wine. Oh, you need to calm down. It was really stressful. I remember, at one point my boyfriend at some point, had a horrible day, and I would like leave a 6-pack on his doorstep type of thing. You had a hard day. Here you go. Yeah. We turn it around, and it's that celebration. Here's a bottle of champagne, a glass of wine. Let's cheers. There's this whole, such an extreme, but it's really actually not allowing us to feel those extremes. But even talking about it, it's kind of like, so what do we replace it with? Because, having a glass of champagne or bubbly or a cheers, and celebration, that is one thing that I notice I do want in my life. And it does feel lacking when you're doing it with like sparkling water or, it doesn't have that same feel. So how do we like navigate that?
Yeah. Well, the first question I would have you ask is, do you want the taste and the like feeling of sophistication, like you have something special, or are you
Yeah.
really wanting that feeling of slightly checking out, of maybe not being present
Mm.
fully? And it's really hard to say because of course we all think we want to be happy, but I don't know, Courtney, have you ever been and experienced something that you were like almost your nervous system was like on overload from, like it was so
Yeah.
exciting that like you're having like the rock star effect, like endorphins are moving, and it feels weird to come down from that. Like you understand why rock stars get off the stage and they go back to their hotel room and they're all alone, and that's why they do drugs or drink, because there's like, that is such an overwhelming surge of emotions to handle in your body. And so if you're not used to that, of course, like doing something to like quiet it down a little bit would seem like a great idea. And so the first thing is to decide, okay, am I willing to be happy? Am I willing to feel the feeling of excitement in my body? And then the next like easier thing is, there's actually some really badass alcohol-free alternatives that aren't like sparkling water or grape juice. My favorite, I actually was the bridesmaid or the maid of honor at a wedding maybe I guess 2 falls ago. And I brought in my favorite non-alcoholic wine brand is Shirley, and they do de-alcoholized wine that's really great quality. It's not grape juice. It is like a nice quality wine that's been de-alcoholized, which means it has been fermented just like a regular wine, and the alcohol has been pulled out of it. And so it doesn't taste like you're drinking just like Welch's. It tastes very, very good. So I brought in my own sparkling like champagne or rosé, and that's what I had for the toast. And I was perfectly okay with that. Like I was like, it feels like I'm drinking something sophisticated. It's special. I don't drink it all the time. And you know what else is interesting is when you're drinking something and you're not dulling your senses, you really can't drink that much of it, because I remember times where I would throw back a lot of champagne and there was nothing more dangerous than that. But when I'm drinking and I'm fully in control of my wits, I can only drink a couple of small glasses of that. And I was like, no more, I'm good. And just for me, having something in my glass was good enough. It didn't really take anything else, but different things for different people. So I wonder if you found a really good alternative and felt comfortable bringing it into the situation, if that would be, or anyone listening, if that would be a good alternative, because it's worked for me.
Well, I think you nailed it on the head right there. Just having that glass. Sometimes it's that safety of having that glass, and you don't, even if it is like you're trying to fit in or something, that can help. No one actually really cares. I feel like
no one cares or knows what's in your glass.
Everyone only cares about themselves. Like no one really truly cares. So it's like you have a glass, you're partaking as long as you're not sitting on the sidelines. But sometimes people need that to feel comfortable and have that like safety thing to ground them in the moment. So, I mean, I could see how that would work. I know even my husband, he's in sales, and so he'll be on like that's just like prime for, you got to take everyone out and drink and party. And it becomes this weird thing, like, why aren't you drinking? He'll just order like a Sprite or sparkle, something that looks like he has a cocktail in his glass, it's just because he doesn't want to, but like, it does become this like weird thing. And so it's like, how do you navigate that weirdness, and how do you celebrate, and how do you belong with the group? And it's just really fascinating to me, the different tricks and tools that we can use to do that. I mean, but I think the most part of it is like, do you even want to be in that situation? I find, unless it's like a wedding or an event, something that you want to be at, like,
exactly,
just removing yourself from that situation, because it's just most likely probably not in alignment with you.
Well, yeah. And then there are some situations like with your husband that, he has to go to some of these work things, but I am now a relentless advocate for myself. So sometimes that looks like I do this anyway. Anytime I go to a restaurant, I always look at the menu ahead just to see like what food I want to eat. But now you can usually see the alcohol menus and see if they have a non-alcoholic option. You can arrive early and talk to the bartender about what they could make you throughout the night if you don't want to talk about it and make it a deal. Or, if I'm going, that wedding that I went to, I called the venue and I said, hey, by the way, do you have anything non-alcoholic? Oh, you don't? I would like to bring my own. Can you please stash it behind the bar? And I just said, I'm bringing it for myself because I want to make sure that I don't have to worry about this. And it's me going above and beyond. I could have asked the bride to take care of it. And I'm like, no, I'm just going to call the venue myself. I'll have it shipped there. No big deal. And that was a situation where I went out of my way, but going out of my way was so much better than the alternative, which was to hold a glass of champagne and take a fake drink or, whatever else the other options were, or hold a glass of champagne. And, I wouldn't have been tempted to do this, but actually drink it, even though I didn't want it, just because I felt like I had to. So sometimes it's just like being a relentless advocate for yourself. If you really are, wanting to pursue a goal or wanting to pursue a different lifestyle.
Yeah. All I can think about is like those first few months when you're pregnant and you're not wanting to tell everyone, like the finagling that goes through of like trying to hold that glass and just like hide it. But like, if I actually think about it, even going there, it's like, that's, I think where I'm not sober, but like my very, very limited drinking started is because then you realize you don't really need it. And, I had kids back to back. So it was like, it was a period of time. And then it just like one thing led to another. And then you realize you really don't miss it and you don't need it. So how does anyone who wants to work with you and go on this journey to really learn how to, if they are sober curious, or I love how you say elective sobriety, take the next steps and work with you?
Yes. Well, as you can tell, I have some rather esoteric and very spiritually rooted views about alcohol that are a little different. And I teach a lot of these inside my book, which just came out. It's called Unbottled Potential. And you can find that anywhere books are sold. And if you're listening around, I always have a challenge available for people who just want to take a break from alcohol and dip their toe in the alcohol-free pond. But I will also be doing a special iteration of that challenge for Dry January. That's a process, I guess, that's near and dear to my heart because that's how I quit drinking, is through taking a break from alcohol through Dry January. And I think that if you are someone who's curious, that's a great place to start because so many people are participating in it or doing these new year, new you kind of overhauls of their life. And so it's a great time to implement a new healthy activity and give yourself a springboard. So you can catch me there. I'm online everywhere at Amanda Kuda, at Kuda, and I would love to connect with you if what I shared resonated or hit a hot button for you.
Well, I'm curious. I love the title of your book. Do you think we are stopping our potential by indulging?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Unless you are someone who like very, very rarely drinks, on occasion. And even then I could make a case for it. But if you're someone who's like me and most of my clients who you're high achieving, you're ambitious, and you drink on a pretty regular, consistent basis, even if it's at a moderate level, you're absolutely blocking your potential. And I detail all the ways in which that happens really subtly in the book. And I think that anyone who is curious would be quite surprised to kind of have that reality check.
Yeah. I think the fact that it's subtle is key because there are a lot of people in the space that have done wonderful things in their life that, maybe aren't as vocal about the fact that they are sober or they're not, drinking or whatever it is. And you can see it. The proof is in the pudding. When you're not in that space, things just take off at a different level.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm so excited to hear how your journey goes and anyone else who's listened to this resonates with. I'd love to hear any feedback that you have on your own journey as well.
Well, thank you so much, Amanda. I love it. And I love what you're doing. And I love how you're making this more viable to everyone. So thank you so much for joining me and talking to me today.
Thank you, Courtney. Absolutely. Take care.
And that's it for today's Intentional Living with Courtney Meyers. Thank you so much for listening. And thank you, Amanda Kuda, for joining me in such a great conversation, all about tapping into your unbottled potential, putting down the alcohol, and really owning your authentic self. If you want to get in touch with Amanda or follow any of her challenges, I'll put all the information in the show notes below. And as always, you can find Intentional Living with Courtney Meyers and Intentional Media on our website at CourtneyMyers.com. That's where you'll find our courses, our books, and everything else we have going on. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.